For 15 years, Haddonfield, Illinois, was the picture of the American dream. It was a town of manufactured lawns, unlocked doors, and the comforting sound of the Midwestern wind blowing through tree-lined streets. To the people of Haddonfield, the tragedy that had occurred in 1963 was a scar that had finally faded into a faint forgotten legend. They lived in the quiet, golden peace of the unaware, raising their children in the very shadow of the Myers house, never realizing that the silence of the boy now contained in Smith Grove Sanitarium wasn't the silence of a healing mind. It was merely the cold, cruel silence of the eye of a storm. They didn't see the storm building. They didn't feel the barometric pressure of pure evil dropping year after year. But one man did. Dr. Samuel Loomis didn't see a patient. He didn't see a victim of a life-altering trauma. For 15 years, he sat across from a void, watching a force of nature gather its strength. He tried to warn them. He pleaded with the boards, the judges, the rational men who believed in rehabilitation and standard medical practices. He told them the storm wasn't coming. The storm was actually here, sitting in a chair, waiting for the first crack in the glass. They, of course, called him an alarmist. They called him obsessed. They stayed in their quiet, peaceful homes, tucked their children in bed, and waited for morning, never realizing that the pressure was building. Not knowing that the kid who had killed his sister in 1963 wasn't just locked in a room, staring at a wall. He was looking through the wall with inhuman patience, looking forward to one night in particular when he would change the world forever. Halloween. In 1978, movie audiences had no idea they were witnessing cinematic history. They walked into theaters across the country, drawn in by the poster of a terrifying, jagged pumpkin morphing into a butcher knife, expecting a fun, scary night out. Maybe even a few cheap thrills and a laugh with their friends along the way. What they got was a nightmare that would linger in their hearts for the rest of their lives. During this time, horror mostly meant monsters from outer space or creatures from the deep. But then John Carpenter and Deborah Hill came along and planted the thing right in your front yard. The beast was supposed to live far away in a distant castle or on the moors over in Europe somewhere, not in the middle of Main Street, USA. It's easy to fall asleep knowing that Dracula is held up in Transylvania or wherever the hell that is. But try falling asleep with the image in your head of Michael Myers standing outside in the dark looking up at your bedroom window. It's not so easy, is it? Legend has it that in those first screenings, the air in the theaters wasn't just cold, it was heavy, thick with dread and anxiety. There is actual archival audio from 1979 where you can hear the audience's panic screams right out of the gate, completely taken off guard at what they were seeing. They weren't just watching a movie anymore. They were experiencing the death of innocence. The Boogyman had been made flesh, dropped right in their laps. He was waiting behind hedges, outside schoolyards, in the shadow of every tree in any street in America. Your street. Carpenter and Hill didn't give the Boogeyman a face. They gave the viewer a blank, pale white canvas to paint their own face of horror upon, making Michael Myers not the Boogeyman, but your Boogeyman. If this faceless nightmare could be behind a hedge in Haddonfield, Illinois, he could be behind the oak tree in your backyard in Nashville or Florida or Ohio or wherever you're from. By stripping the monster of its Gothic castle and its European moors, Carpenter and Hill turned every suburban street into a hunting ground. They took the one place we had felt absolute control, our homes. And they showed us that a simple glass pane is the only thing standing between us and a force of nature that has no motive, no mercy, and no end. When I watch this movie with younger people, they all say the same thing. Oh man, it's not that scary. It's not as scary as you said it would be. This is a fair point. My generation, Generation X, wasn't fully desensitized yet. We only had a few truly horrific movies under our belts. But I dare these courageous youths to finish watching Halloween, then go walk home alone at night and not think that Michael Myers is watching your every step. Go ahead. I dare you. The reason it's not so easy is because you know in your heart that he is definitely out there somewhere, waiting patiently for that perfect moment when you think you're safe in your sanctuary, free from the dangers of the outside world. Halloween changed my life, and I'm not being dramatic with that statement. My world had a definite line before Halloween and after. I had just turned 8 years old when it was released to theaters. My birthday is in October 3rd to be exact. My grandmother took me shopping for my birthday, understanding that an 8-year-old would rather pick out their own birthday present than leave the decision up to an adult. While we were walking past the Coyle Theater in Charleroi, Pennsylvania, I saw that poster gleaming from the window. I will never forget the feeling I had when I saw that shocking pumpkin face turning into a butcher knife. I immediately told my grandmother I wanted to see this movie for my birthday. And apparently the poster didn't alert her to the kind of movie it was, so she was like, fine, if that's what you want. 10 minutes in, and Grandma was like, nope, we're not watching this. So I did what any free-thinking 8-year-old would do. I ran and hid in the dark. She looked for me for a few minutes, but eventually gave up. I think she figured if the little idiot wants to be scared out of his mind, so be it. I watched the rest of the movie, hidden in the dark, letting the sights and sounds burn into my psyche and fuel a fire that would never leave me. When Grandma told my dad what I had done, I got into serious trouble. No Atari for a week. But it was beyond worth it. To say Halloween changed my life is an understatement. It was the beginning of my addiction to all things horror. And what a glorious time. The 80s were just about to happen, the true golden age of horror. And I'd be a teenager with access to a video store. The next transformative movie for me, and the reason I became a horror writer, is Friday the 13th Part 2. But we're going to get into that in another video. It wasn't just the movie poster or the timing of the release that made this movie so perfect. It was the craft. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill were working with a budget of roughly $300,000, peanuts even by 1978 standards. It was that lack of money that forced them to innovate in ways that would change filmmaking forever. But first, let's talk about The Mask. It's the most famous face in horror, and it was born out of a trip to a costume shop on Hollywood Boulevard. They had two choices, a Don Post clown mask and a $2 William Shatner Captain Kirk mask. So they took the Captain Kirk mask, widened out the eye holes, spray painted it a deathly fish belly white, and matted the hair with a bunch of hairspray. Think about the irony of that. They took the face of Captain Kirk, a symbol of 1960s hope and heroism, and stripped it of all its humanity. By making it a blank, pale canvas, they created a shape that could reflect whatever the viewer feared the most. When Michael looks at you, you aren't looking at a man. You're looking at a void. No emotion, no empathy, no humanity. And then there's the music. So I've always been obsessed with the Halloween theme. Carpenter composed it himself in about 3 days. It's in 5/4 time, which is an unbalanced time signature. It feels like a heartbeat that's just slightly wrong. It's the sound of the storm, constantly building but never resolving. And finally, there's the Panaglide. Carpenter was one of the first to use this new camera technique to give us Michael's point of view. For the first time, we weren't just watching the victim, we were forced to breathe with the killer. We became the intruder in the house. The whole thing was a masterclass in less is more. They couldn't afford blood and guts, so they gave us shadows and sound. They realized that what the mind imagines behind a half-closed closet door is infinitely more terrifying than anything special effects can build. One of my favorite things about Halloween is that John and Deborah never tell the viewer why Michael Myers is stalking these particular teenagers. Everyone wants to know what the killer's motivation is, but seriously, isn't it scarier if we don't know? Excluding everything written and all the sequels, focusing only on Halloween 1978, here's my theory. In 1963, Michael Myers snaps and kills his sister for no reason, a child with a fractured mind. When he returns 15 years later to the only place he knows outside of Smith's Grove Sanitarium, he goes directly to his old home, which is empty. Laurie Strode comes along to put a key under the mat of the Myers house, as her father had asked her to do earlier that morning. And Michael Myers was inside, saw Laurie from the window in the door. This is where he marked her. The fracture in his mind that drove him to kill his sister in 1963 has now marked the girl he just saw through the door, and the hunt has begun. She was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. And there's the horror. Anyone could simply be walking along and suddenly be marked by evil. Now, that's way scarier than giving him some family motivation about wiping out all of his living relatives. If I know Michael Myers is out to kill his entire family, why would I be scared? I'm not related to the guy, so he has no problem with me unless I get in the way of him killing his family, which I'll just move out of the way. But if he's out there stalking random people for reasons that only make sense to his twisted psyche, then no one is safe, not even me. The fact that someone could stalk and kill you for no reason sends paralyzing fear down my spine. If we strip away the sequels and the masks, we are left with the most uncomfortable truth of all. The shape isn't just a man who escaped from a sanitarium. He's a crack in the foundation of the world. In the original script, Carpenter didn't just call him Michael. He called him a force of nature. When you look at the final shots of the film, the empty hallways, the dark stairs, the quiet backyard, you realize that Michael didn't just disappear into the night. He actually became the night. If Michael Myers is the storm, then Dr. Samuel Loomis is the only man standing on the shore, screaming at a town that refuses to prepare. In the world of classic horror, Dr. Loomis is our Van Helsing. But where Van Helsing had silver bullets and ancient scripture, Loomis had 15 years of staring into a black hole. He didn't just study Michael, he was consumed by him. By 1978, Dr. Loomis was, by any clinical definition, becoming unhinged himself. Think about his performance. He isn't calm. He isn't professional by any means. He's frantic. He's waving a gun around in a suburban neighborhood and shouting about the devil's eyes to anybody who will listen. He's the archetypal crazy prophet. He's the guy on the street corner holding a sign that says the end is near. Except in Haddonfield, he's the only one who's actually right. So why the obsession, though? Why not just retire and let the state handle their failed patient? I believe Loomis is driven by a crushing, silent weight of guilt. For 15 years, he saw the barometric pressure dropping. He saw the inhumane patience in that boy's eyes. And while he did try to warn the boards and the judges, a part of him feels that he didn't do enough and that he didn't scream loud enough. Every time Michael swings that knife, Loomis feels the phantom weight of the handle in his own hand. He's trying to apprehend a force of nature, not just to save Laurie Strode, but to save his own soul. He's a man trying to outrun a tragedy he saw coming a decade and a half ago. This is a recurring theme in horror. The burden of the watcher. The person who sees the crack in the wall before the building collapses. I find myself really drawn to these characters. The people who are crazy only because they're the only ones who see the world for what it truly is. When you watch Loomis at the end of this film, shooting Michael 6 times and then looking over that balcony to find nothing but grass and shadow, look at his face. Take a good study of his reaction. This isn't the face of a man who's surprised. That's the face of a man who realized that he's been right all along, and that being right is the most terrifying thing in the world to him. For the first hour of Halloween, Laurie Strode is painted as the quintessential suburban teenager. She's responsible, a bit bookish, and arguably the most grounded character in the entire film. But there's a specific brilliance in how Jamie Lee Curtis plays her. She doesn't just cower when adversity arrives, she adapts. It's easy to dismiss Laurie as just another scream queen, but that does a massive disservice to what she represents. She is the first horror heroine to truly subvert the damsel in distress trope. When the bodies of her friends begin to pile up, Laurie isn't paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of the situation. She's driven by a singular, fierce maternal instinct to protect the children in her care. Look at the final confrontation. She isn't a trained fighter. She's a teenager using a knitting needle, a wire hanger, and anything she can find to hold back the monster. She's fighting for the life of those kids with a ferocity that is genuine. She takes a hit, she gets back up. She takes another, she stands her ground. In a way, Laurie Strode is the exact inverse of Dr. Loomis. Loomis tries to fight the storm with words and warnings, but Laurie fights it with blood and bone. She proves that even when the shape, this unstoppable, soulless void, enters your sanctuary, you don't have to just accept your fate. You can draw a line in the sand. Laurie Strode is the beating heart of Halloween. Without her grounding the audience in that terrifying, desperate human struggle, Michael Myers would just be another boogeyman. But because of her, he becomes a challenge. And that's why we still remember her name today. So why are we still talking about Haddonfield? Why, nearly 5 decades later, do we still feel a phantom chill when we see a white mask sitting in the dark, or hear the slow, methodical pace of a piano theme in 5/4 time? It's not just because the movie was scary for its time. It's because John Carpenter and Deborah Hill captured a fundamental, universal anxiety that hasn't aged a day: the death of our certainty. We live in a world obsessed with safety, with locks, with alarms, Ring doorbell cameras, and with the desperate need to believe that bad things only happen to people in bad places. This kind of stuff only happens on the news, and I don't even know where that neighborhood is. Halloween stripped that illusion away. It told us that evil isn't a monster that lives in a dungeon or a castle. It's a neighbor. It's a shadow. It's the silence that follows you when you think you're finally alone. The legacy of Michael Myers isn't his kill count. It's the fact that he represents the randomness of fate. He doesn't have a personal vendetta against you. He doesn't want your money. And he doesn't care about your philosophy. Doesn't give a shit about your politics. Doesn't care anything about you, really. He is a mirror. A blank, white, expressionless mirror reflecting the void of the world back at us. He reminds us that in the middle of our manicured lawns and our quiet, peaceful nights, the storm is always just around the corner, waiting for the first crack in the glass. And that's why we watch. That's why we study these films. That's why we love them. They really scare the shit out of us. In here. We watch to remind ourselves of the stakes. We watch to honor the survivors, the Laurie Strodes of the world who refuse to give up when the lights go out. And if I'm being honest, we watch to learn how to endure it. How many ways can you escape a horror movie? You yell at the screen every time you see somebody being chased. These movies teach us. Because deep down, we all know that The Shape doesn't just exist in 1978. It exists in the shadows of every street in America, waiting patiently for the moment when we drop our guard. Thank you for joining me in the darkness. I'm Robert Ference, and this has been Chilled Bones. Please like and subscribe the channel if you're interested in the strange and macabre. I'm sure you're just as twisted as I am. And please take a look at my website, chilledbones.com, where you can find information about my latest novels and all of my other works and weird things that I'm into. If you like reading scary things, you'll probably enjoy my books. Just saying. Probably.